Welcome to Caught on the Hill, where we break down the most important moments from official U.S. government hearings, briefings, and public proceedings.
Yeah, because almost every day, elected officials and agency leaders make these statements on the record that really shape the national conversation.
Exactly. But for most people, there is simply too much to watch, too much to sort through, and honestly, too little time to follow every hearing from start to finish.
Right, and that's where this deep dive comes in. Caught on the Hill is built to help you quickly understand what happened, what was said, and why it actually matters.
And everything begins with the actual public proceeding itself, the hearing or official event where these exchanges took place. From there, we highlight the key moments and present them in clear, accessible discussions.
Basically designed to cut through the confusion without adding any of that partisan noise.
Spot on. Now, before we begin, just a quick disclosure. This audio may sound fully human, but it is created with the assistance of AI tools designed to help make complex public proceedings easier to digest.
Even so, this is not an automated process without oversight. Human creators are actively involved in selecting the material, shaping the presentation, and putting real effort into making each deep dive informative, balanced, and worth your time.
Absolutely. This is Caught on the Hill. Let's begin.
Imagine waking up, right, and you find out a burglar broke into your house.
A terrifying thought, honestly.
Yeah, but here's the twist. They didn't break in to steal your TV or, your jewelry or whatever. Instead, they just spent hours quietly wiring your foundation to explode at the push of a remote button. And then they just slipped away to wait.
Just waiting for the right moment.
Exactly. And according to a recent closed-door Capitol Hill hearing, that is essentially what sophisticated adversaries are doing to the United States power grid right now.
It's a massive wake-up call.
It really is.
And the hearing we are pulling apart today really highlights a threat that just completely bypasses traditional borders.
Yeah, we are doing a deep dive into the complete testimony from a recent 2026 U.S. House Subcommittee hearing, and it was titled Cyber, Information Technologies and Innovation, Cyber Posture of the Department of Defense.
And the witnesses they called for this, they were the absolute top of the food chain.
Right. We were talking about the Honorable Katie Sutton, the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Cyber Policy, alongside General Joshua Rudd. He is the commander of U.S. Cyber Command and director of the National Security Agency.
Yeah, let me tell you, the picture they paint in this hearing is definitely not some standard dry bureaucratic budget update.
Not at all.
It is a massive warning light blinking red. Because their testimonies outline this fundamental change in the character of modern warfare. They get into the rapid, almost chaotic integration of artificial intelligence, this desperate scramble for technical talent, and a highly contentious debate about whether the United States actually needs to completely tear down and restructure its military.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Sutton's testimony opens with a frankly terrifying assessment of the current threat landscape. She stated really clearly that adversaries are no longer just conducting espionage.
Right.
They are actively preparing for conflict.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that for decades, the narrative around state-sponsored cyber activity was primarily about extraction.
Like intelligence gathering.
Exactly. Stealing intellectual property, monitoring diplomatic communications, or maybe figuring out the specs of a new weapons system. But Sutton points to a massive strategic shift toward what she calls going from exploitation to effects.
Exploitation to effects, meaning what exactly?
Meaning the goal is no longer just gathering data, it is disruption.
Right, and she specifically named Volt Typhoon during this exchange, which, for anyone who isn't tracking the daily cyber threat briefings, Volt Typhoon is a Chinese state-sponsored hacking group.
Right.
And the detail that made me actually pause was her revealing that groups like this are prepositioning disruptive capabilities inside U.S. critical infrastructure.
It is terrifying because they're targeting the absolute bedrock of civilian life.
Mm-hmm.
We are talking water treatment plants.
Oh, wow.
Telecommunications hubs, civilian power grids, aviation networks.
So going back to that burglar analogy, they are basically wiring the foundation.
Precisely. The whole objective of prepositioning is to embed malicious code deep inside these systems and just leave it dormant.
Right.
So a geopolitical crisis or an armed conflict actually kicks off. They don't have to waste time trying to hack in. They are already inside the house.
You just push the button.
Exactly. They can immediately trigger those payloads to sever communications or shut off power in the dead of winter, or even scramble the logistics software the military uses to deploy ships and aircraft.
But wait, if we know they are inside the foundation, how do we respond? Because I have to push back on the traditional military mindset here. Like, if the adversary is already in the house, does this mean the traditional, purely defensive posture is completely obsolete?
You mean just building a taller digital firewall and hoping it holds?
Yeah, exactly.
In short, yes. A static defense is basically a losing strategy in this domain. Sutton and General Rudd both emphasize that the U.S. has to gain a strategic advantage below the level of armed conflict.
Below the level of armed conflict.
Right. They call it defending forward or persistent engagement.
Defending forward.
Yeah, it means you cannot just wait for the malware to hit an American server. You have to constantly contest the adversary's freedom of movement in cyberspace.
Okay, but isn't contesting below armed conflict just a really polite bureaucratic way of saying we are initiating a cyber war?
Well, that is a great question.
Because if we are actively poking around in Russian or Chinese networks, trying to neutralize their tools before they can use them, how does that not just immediately escalate into a full-blown physical conflict?
And that right there is the defining tension of modern cyber policy. The military argument is that cyberspace is the domain of constant contact.
Constant contact.
Yeah. If you aren't actively disrupting their infrastructure, you are effectively giving them a safe haven to arm that bomb in your foundation.
Mm-hmm.
It is a massive tightrope walk, and it really relies heavily on these unwritten rules of proportionality.
And complicating that tightrope walk is the ultimate wild card they introduced into the hearing, which is artificial intelligence.
Oh, absolutely. The AI factor changes everything.
Because Sutton described AI as a massive force multiplier that is accelerating the entire attack life cycle. But, we hear the term AI thrown around so much these days, it almost loses its meaning.
It really does become a buzzword.
Right. So in a practical, technical sense, based on the hearing, how does an AI model actually accelerate a cyber attack?
Well, think about the manual hacking process. A human operator has to methodically map a target network. They have to look for an open port or maybe an outdated piece of software. Then they have to figure out how to exploit it.
Which takes time.
Exactly. Then they have to write the specific code to break in and then finally execute it.
Mm-hmm.
That takes significant time and human capital. But AI automates that entire discovery and exploitation phase.
So an adversary just directs an AI to find a crack in a target's armor, and the system does all the heavy lifting?
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
And it does it at what the military refers to as machine speed.
Machine speed.
Right. An AI can scan vast global networks simultaneously. And it's specifically looking for zero-day vulnerabilities.
Let's define that really quickly for you guys listening. A zero-day is basically a flaw in a piece of software that the original creators don't even know exists yet, meaning they have 0 days of notice to write a fix for it.
Exactly. And finding a 0 day used to be the holy grail for a human hacker. It could often take months of reverse engineering. But an AI model, it can spot a 0 day and automatically generate the exploit code for it in a matter of seconds.
Seconds? That is insane.
It is. The sheer volume and relentless pace of automated attacks simply overwhelm traditional human-monitored defensive software.
And Sutton also pointed out that this dramatically lowers the barrier to entry, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because you no longer need a massive facility filled with elite state-sponsored coders.
Right. A rogue actor with access to a sophisticated AI model can suddenly generate malware that previously required a nation-state's resources.
Which creates a severe operational problem for the Department of Defense.
Completely. Because they can no longer rely on the traditional patching model. In the past, a vulnerability was found, a software patch was tested for a few weeks, a directive went out, and commanders were given 30 days to update their servers.
30 days is an eternity now.
It really is. They have to radically compress that defensive timeline to match machine speed, or the network is compromised before the patch is even written.
Which introduces a massive paradox, and this is something that really stuck out to me in the hearing. If these attacks are happening at machine state driven by AI, the only effective countermeasure is a human operator brilliant enough to spot the anomalies the AI is exploiting.
Right, or intuitive enough to write countermeasures the AI hasn't anticipated.
Exactly. You cannot fight an AI war solely with older defensive software. You need absolute top-tier human talent.
And that operational necessity is what drove the entire middle portion of the hearing. Because General Rudd provided a statistic that really frames the scale of what they're asking this human talent to do.
The 8,000 missions number.
Yes. In 2025 alone, Cyber Command executed over 8,000 missions. That is a 25% increase from just the year prior.
And he specifically mentioned their support for real-world combatant operations. He named Operation Midnight Hammer in Iran. And Operation Absolute Resolve in Venezuela. So these aren't just IT guys sitting in a server room running virus scans.
Not at all. They are actively engaged in offensive and defensive maneuvers 24/7. They are providing real-time support to forces on the ground.
But to keep up that kind of operational tempo, you need the best hackers in the world. And the hearing really laid bare this massive collision between military recruitment and the civilian tech economy.
It is a huge problem. Sutton confirmed that the cyber mission force is currently 80 to 90% uniformed military.
Which creates a massive financial disparity.
It's huge.
Think about it. If you are a brilliant 22-year-old software engineer, you are looking at standard military pay on one hand.
Right, which isn't great.
No. And on the other hand, you have a massive salary, stock options, and a flexible work environment from a private cybersecurity firm. It is an incredibly difficult pitch for the Pentagon to make.
Which is why Representative Fallon brought a very blunt, pragmatic view to this exact tension during the hearing.
Oh, I loved his comments on this.
Right. He argued that the military needs to entirely drop its traditional decorum to acquire this talent. He explicitly stated he does not care if a recruit has long hair or is covered in tattoos, as long as they can hit the keyboard adeptly.
As long as they can hit the keyboard adeptly, I found his bluntness really refreshing, honestly.
It cuts right through the bureaucracy. He said the technical mastery has to outweigh military presentation.
And that pragmatism seems to be the core philosophy behind a new initiative they discussed called Cybercom 2.0.
Yes, Cybercom 2.0. Sutton explained that instead of just endlessly trying to recruit huge numbers of people to match the private sector, they want to focus intensely on mastery.
Quality over quantity.
Exactly. They want to keep operators on keyboard longer, rather than forcing them to rotate into administrative military roles just to check a box for their next promotion.
Right, because normally in the military, if you want to rank up, you have to do your time pushing papers or leading a larger unit.
Exactly. But the deeper challenge is retention. How do you incentivize a master hacker to stay in government service when they could leave and easily quadruple their salary?
And that is where Representative McCormick offered a fascinating analogy during the hearing that explains the military's unique leverage.
Right, the lawyer analogy.
Yeah, he compared elite cyber operators to trial lawyers.
It is a really apt comparison.
Right, because if you are a young, highly ambitious trial lawyer, you need real courtroom experience to prove your worth. You cannot just read about case law. You need to actually be in front of a judge.
And for a cyber operator, they crave real-world offensive experience. They want to test their skills against live, sophisticated nation-state adversaries.
Right.
And the only place they can legally go on the offensive, actually breaking into foreign networks to conduct operations like Midnight Hammer, is under the legal authorities of the United States government.
So the military's biggest recruiting tool isn't the paycheck at all.
No, it is the mission itself.
Yeah.
It is the legal authorization to do the most high-stakes hacking in the world.
Which is a powerful draw. But it still doesn't solve the issue of surge capacity. I know Representative Ryan and Representative Finman heavily scrutinize the current systems for civilian experts who just want to help out part-time.
Right. They discussed the creation of a joint cyber reserve or a cyber auxiliary.
Because right now, the military bureaucracy is incredibly hostile to outside help. Like, if you have a world-class cybersecurity expert working at a bank in Omaha and they want to spend their weekends defending national infrastructure, the military forces them through this massive gauntlet. They are actually required to pass antiquated physical standards.
Yeah, like running a 2-mile physical training test within a specific time limit.
Which makes absolutely zero sense. Why does a 2-mile run time matter if your job is to sit at a terminal and block a malware injection?
It doesn't. And General Rudd admitted they are often their own worst enemy when it comes to process. I mean, the security clearance pipeline alone is a huge impediment.
Oh, the 18-month, wait.
Right. A civilian expert has to fill out a massive background form, undergo polygraphs, and often wait 12 to 18 months just to get a clearance. Meanwhile, private industry hires them after 2 interviews.
It is absurd. But the core friction point here isn't just about hiring practices or physical fitness tests, is it?
No, not at all. Because even if the military revamps the clearance process, taking a fast-paced, highly unconventional hacker and dropping them into a rigid, hierarchical 20th century military bureaucracy runs the risk of completely stifling their potential.
Which forces the most contentious structural question of the entire hearing.
Right.
Where do these people actually belong? How should the United States cyber force be organized to actually win this fight?
And to really understand that debate, we have to look at how the military handles cyber right now. Currently, Cyber Command operates on a shared capability model. It is very similar to SOCOM, the Special Operations Command.
Right. General Rudd explained it as a purple force.
Or Purple Force, exactly.
Meaning it blends all of the military branches together. So the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines all recruit, train, and fund their own distinct cyber forces.
Right.
And then those units are effectively loaned out or integrated into the broader Cyber Command to conduct joint operations.
But Representative Houlihan brought intense, highly critical questioning regarding that exact model. Her argument is that the individual service branches will never fundamentally prioritize the cyber domain over their historical defining missions.
And that makes sense. Think about the career trajectory of an ambitious young Army officer. To make general, your career relies on mastering what the military calls kinetic realities.
Right, the physical stuff.
Yeah, infantry movements, artillery fire, armored tank divisions. The entire culture and promotion structure of the Army is built around physical kinetic force.
And if you are the Navy, your institutional prestige comes from aircraft carriers and submarines.
Right.
So Houlihan's point is that when an internal promotion board is comparing a tank battalion commander to a cyber warfare officer who, say, quietly wrote a script that disabled an enemy server, the board historically promotes the tank commander.
Every time.
Right. Furthermore, when a service branch is forced to choose between funding a new destroyer or funding a new cyber group, the institutional gravity will always pull the money toward the ship. It is what they know.
Because of that cultural bias, she argued the individual branches will never generate the scale or quality of forces required for future cyber warfare. So her proposed solution is massive.
It is huge.
She wants to rip cyber out of the traditional branches entirely and create a fully independent cyber force, like a brand new branch of the military standing alongside the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Space Force.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the historical context she leaned on is vital to understanding this push. Think back to World War II. The Army viewed airplanes simply as flying artillery meant to support ground troops. They heavily resisted the idea of separating out the Army Air Forces. But Congress ultimately realized that the domain of the air was so distinct, it required its own dedicated culture.
Its own specialized training.
Exactly. And its own ring-fenced funding streams. And so the Air Force was created in 1947. We saw the exact same logic applied in 2017 with the creation of the Space Force.
Right. So the argument is that cyberspace is just as distinct a domain of warfare as land, sea, air, or space. And therefore, it inevitably requires its own dedicated service.
Right. She actually pushed Secretary Sutton and General Rudd to commit to keeping an open mind about an independent force.
And how did they respond to that?
Well, they navigated that question very carefully. They agreed to keep an open mind, but they stressed that debating a future organizational chart shouldn't distract from the immediate burning crisis of talent management today.
Right, like let's fix the leak before we remodel the kitchen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Chairman Bacon stepped in with a lot of skepticism about an independent cyber force. He doesn't see a new branch as a silver bullet at all.
What were his main concerns?
He raised significant, highly practical concerns. He pointed out that standing up a new branch inherently creates massive administrative bloat.
Oh, sure. You need a whole new bureaucracy.
Right. You suddenly need to fund a new headquarters, entirely new supply chains, and a new roster of top-heavy general officers and administrative leadership.
Which pulls resources directly away from the actual keyboard operators.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But his biggest concern, the thing he focused heavily on, was the risk of breaking what is called the dual hat synergy.
Okay, for context, for you guys listening, the dual hat synergy refers to the fact that General Rudd actually wears two hats.
Right.
He commands the military side, which is Cyber Command, but he also directs the intelligence gathering side, which is the National Security Agency.
And that integration is arguably the United States' greatest advantage in cyberspace. The NSA gathers the intelligence, finding the vulnerabilities and mapping foreign networks. Then Cyber Command uses that intelligence to immediately execute military operations.
So Chairman Bacon argued that if you carve out an independent military cyber force with its own distinct culture and leadership, you risk building a wall that disrupts that vital real-time pipeline between intelligence gathering and military action.
Exactly. It is a massive structural dilemma. Do you prioritize the unique culture and guaranteed funding of an independent branch? Or do you prioritize the seamless integration of cyber across all the traditional domains and intelligence agencies?
And is there an answer yet?
Well, there is an ongoing National Academy study looking into this exact question right now, but the pressure on the current system is immense.
So what does this all mean? When you step back from the specific debates over recruitment numbers and organizational charts, the implications of this hearing are really profound for you, the listener.
They really are.
Because the core takeaway is that the front line of American defense has completely shifted. It is no longer just our physical borders, our oceans, or our airspace. The front line is the digital connective tissue of your daily life. If a hostile nation wants to cripple a city today, they don't need to send bombers. They target the software running the local water treatment plant. They target the telecommunications networks, the financial routing systems, the power grids. That is the new battlefield.
And right now, adversaries are actively inside those foundations, testing the wiring.
Which is a terrifying thought.
It is.
Yeah.
And that stark reality highlights a final, lingering aspect from the very end of the hearing. We have spent this entire discussion detailing machine speed attacks, zero-day vulnerabilities, and AI force multipliers.
Right, of all the tech.
But at the center of this massive technological arms race is a deeply human element. The hearing briefly touched on the physical infrastructure at Fort Meade, and crucially, the critical need for mental health support for these cyber operators.
Yeah, that brief exchange really puts the unseen human cost of this into perspective.
It really does. It asks a profound question about the people defending that digital connected tissue. Consider the psychological environment of a cyber command operator. They are fighting an invisible war, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
With no geographical boundaries.
Right. There is no physical front line they can retreat from, and there are absolutely no armistices. Every single time they sit at a keyboard, they are engaging in high-stakes, real-world combat against highly sophisticated, state-sponsored adversaries.
And often working in total secrecy where they cannot even tell their families what they do.
Exactly.
Like-
So in an era where warfare is accelerating to the automated speed of artificial intelligence, what is the long-term psychological toll on the human beings forced to keep pace?
It is a heavy question. We can engineer all the advanced AI systems we want and debate structural military branches endlessly. But at the end of the day, how long can human resilience hold the line against a machine speed war?
It certainly makes you view that unseen government machine operating quietly behind closed doors on Capitol Hill in a completely different light.
It really does. Until next time, keep questioning what you hear on the Hill.